Hey, what's up gentlemen and ladies? Welcome back to another top countdown video, and today I'm going to be counting down my top 5 hopes that I have for the highly anticipated Final Fantasy XV. Now, a lot of us have built up very high expectations for this game considering its 10 plus year development cycle, and it was only this year that we finally got the release date announcement. In fact, literally as of today, Final Fantasy XV's release date was announced 3 months ago, and the game releases 3 months from now, so we're right at the halfway point. So I figured what better time to talk about my personal hopes and expectations and hope that the game delivers. So let's hop right into it with number 5. The first thing that I want to mention in regards to Final Fantasy XV is its story. Now so far, what we know about the story from the game makes it seem kind of pretty bare bones, to be honest with you guys. You know, the bad guys take the crystal and you want it back. Not much more than that, but I wanted to go deeper. There needs to be something driving the characters throughout all of this. I want there to be a reason to keep going exploring the world. From what we've seen, there is pretty much nothing stopping Noctis and the crew from just turning right back around at the beginning of the game and facing the Empire, other than the fact that they're more powerful than them. If the entire game's plot revolves around them, you know, going around the world, just getting all of the different summons, or simply just getting stronger, then I'm gonna be pretty disappointed. I want these 4 characters, not just Noctis, to have a reason to hate Idolus, to have a reason to want to kill Ardyn, to have a reason for wanting to stop Arania or defeating Verstil. The list goes on. For a game with so many characters, so far their motivations are pretty bad, you know. Ardyn wants to take the crystal, so all the bad guys want to take the crystal. And Noctis wants to defeat him and get it back, so all the good guys want to defeat him and get it back. There's really no personal motivation for almost any of these characters, at least not that we know of so far. And this is where the game comes in. And while we're on the topic of story, the game needs to have a good intro. From what we've been told, the game starts out with your car breaking and you going to get it fixed while the invasion happens and you just get news from it. And I personally think that experiencing this invasion firsthand and fleeing from the battle would have been better. Think about how exciting and gripping Final Fantasy VI and VII's openings were. In medias res, we didn't start in a car station, we started blowing up a power plant and committing an act of terrorism. It gets people immediately intrigued and curious as to what's going on. Final Fantasy XIII, on the other hand, is a prime example of how not to do it. The game might start with high action and get players intrigued, not fully knowing what's going on, but it's so confusing in fact that immediately afterwards they spend the next 20 or so hours trying to explain the confusing story because the game doesn't do a very good job at it on its own. Final Fantasy XV needs a good middle ground, and so far from what we've seen from Tabata, there is potential there. You know, sure, Type 0 may start good, but immediately again it turns around to like normal everyday high school life and politics afterwards, so that's not really what you want. But I feel like I've rambled about this for long enough, so just, you know, good story, motivation for each character, and gripping opening. So moving on to number 4. For my second point, I have more of a gameplay request, and that has to do not with the combat itself, but more with like the character progression and that kind of stuff. See, the last previous Final Fantasies have had a pretty unique and sometimes overcomplicated leveling system in some of the cases. It started with Final Fantasy X and kept going, you know, through 12, all the way into 13. Now, some aspects of this I like, you know, for example, having the option to make any character do any role. Like, for example, Lulu, who is your black mage in Final Fantasy X, can be turned into a full-on commando if you really want her to, and, you know, vice versa with all the different characters. But my main thing is that in Final Fantasy XV, you're only going to get to play as Noctis, so you're really not going to want him to be any one thing. You kind of just want him to be a little bit of everything. You know, sure, Gladio may be a fighter and a tank, Ignis could be like the mage and the healer, Prompto range and, you know, debuff, but Noctis can't just fit into one little bubble, otherwise it's just not going to be fun to play. Now, to be fair, we don't know what they're going to do in terms of this, you know, if they're going to have some kind of sphere grid, license board, Crystarian type of thing, but I think that something like the Kingdom Hearts leveling system would work better, especially for an action game. See, initially, going to sleep was what the characters did in order to gain the levels from throughout the day, and if you wanted a bit more of a challenge, you just didn't sleep. But on top of that, there was some disadvantages to that. You know, the characters would get tired throughout the days and perform wars, and you don't really want that. But at E3, Tabata confirmed that there will instead be an item that you can equip to not gain experience, which makes me question if the whole sleeping to gain levels thing will even be in the game anymore. So the point is, I want some level of customization, not to have everything pre-chosen for us, but not to the level of something like 13. And while we're on the topic of 13, don't have the terrible weapon upgrading system that they had there, where you don't really know what you're doing half the time and it renders any new weapons useless since you already wasted all of your old items to level up the worst weapons when the ones that you got later would be more powerful. Just, we don't need any of that. Just simple, you get new weapon, go play with it. That's it. For number 3, I want a good ending to the game as well as a satisfying villain. See, the problem with some of the more recent Final Fantasy games is that their villains have just been so bland and one-dimensional. For example, in Final Fantasy X or 13. Yeah, sorry to keep bashing 13, I thought it was a decent game personally, but it does have many issues. Anyways, with those characters, their motivation just basically became their personality, and that was their one defining trait. What happened in the days of Kefka and Sephiroth? In Final Fantasy VII, we get to see the transformation. We see the villain's motivations firsthand. We experience that transformation that brought Sephiroth, from just a regular soldier to I want to destroy the world. Final Fantasy XIII, a guy wants Ragnarok because he does, and he's a fal'Cie, and all fal'Cie want that. And they chose us specifically because reasons, and it's just not very well written. With Final Fantasy XV, we know that the kingdoms have been at war for a long time over the crystal, but what makes these guys different? Let us see Arden or Verstal and what drove them to this. What is their end goal that justifies killing hundreds for this little crystal? Why do the 4 of us want to kill him? And speaking of which, have there be a satisfying conclusion, Square? I know that they said that they're not going to make sequels for this game, but it wouldn't be the first time that they took a statement back like this. Part of me still thinks that they wouldn't let a game this big and well-known go so easily, and when that's the case, we usually end up with the there's no need for a sequel, but here's one anyways of Final Fantasy X, or the slap to the face that was 13-2's to be continued ending, so please, Square. Good villain, and in turn, good ending. Number 2 for me has to do with the combat, in that I want it to feel less sloppy and more responsive. Now, here's what I mean by that. First of all, props to Square Enix for making the characters' movement and all that kind of stuff really realistic, but FYI guys, that doesn't really work for high-action games like what 15 is going for. See, Final Fantasy 15 does the thing where if a character is facing one way, and you tap the analog in the opposite direction, instead of immediately starting the run animation in that direction, you have to wait for the character's turn animation to happen first. And when you press forward, the character doesn't immediately start moving forward. You have to get through their startup animation and wait about, 1 second until they actually get to their normal running speed, which may not seem like a lot, but in the middle of combat on a high-action RPG, every second counts. Now, it's true that some games do this, and they can get away with it, games like Uncharted, The Last of Us, but here's the thing, those aren't character action games. If you look at games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, even the Kingdom Hearts series itself, none of them have this because it's a bad idea when it comes to these kind of games. It's the difficulty in finding the balance between turn-based JRPG and Western hack and slash. Because of this, the game in many ways just feels slow and unresponsive. I forget who said it exactly, but I remember a quote from back in episode Dusky that went like, it feels less like I'm playing the game and more like I'm telling the game how to play itself. And I could not have said it better myself. Even though Dusky's lowest score was controls, Tabata said that this was unacceptable and promised to fix them, but I'm sorry to say that not much has changed in the Platinum demo. Noctis still feels very heavy and grounded, which is not what you want for a fast-paced game. But we'll see what they end up doing in the final game. At this point, it seems like quite a major change to make only 3 months away from the release, but hopefully they're already working on it as we speak. We'll see. And my number 1 hope for Final Fantasy 15 is a huge open world with tons of things to do, side quests galore and optional areas, bosses, secret weapons, all kinds of things. Now, Tabata has gone on record to say that the game will feature about 100 hours of side content, which is quite a lot to promise, but whether those 100 hours will consist of 99 hours and 45 minutes of grinding for a 15-minute super boss, or 100 actual hours of content, we're not entirely sure. And none of this fetch quest stuff either, Square. But with how big the world is, we could be looking at, secret areas or regions that have their own stories separate to that of the main game's narrative. For the first time since Final Fantasy IX, we're having a proper open world, and the possibilities on that are endless. They could be mini games like in the Golden Saucer from FF7. That alone could add dozens and dozens of hours into the game. And with the Colosseum that we saw in the Alticia footage, that opens up the gate to a gauntlet-style arena battles, you know? Maybe even get to refight bosses, heck, harder versions of them for people that want the challenge, or downloadable optional bosses from previous FFs like in 13.2. Can you imagine getting to fight bosses from FF6 or FF10, but with 15's combat? That would be so cool. I would download every single one of those. And also, don't make the overworld bland and pointless. In older Final Fantasies, like on the PS1, the hardware had its limitations, and because of the turn-based combat, there was only so much that you could do, but with this, every region of the game could bring something new to the table. So Tabata promised us 200 hours of gameplay for completionists. Let's see if that's true this September. And there you have it, guys. Those were my top 5 hopes for Final Fantasy 15. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you guys would like to see from this game, as I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that I missed, but that about wraps it up for me. So either way, that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to blitz that like button, subscribe, and as always, stay tuned for all things Final Fantasy!